welcome to episode 7 of the Dan Cloutier community. On today's show, we have my dear friend, Rob Siegel. I've known Rob from the Boston folk music scene for the past 25 years. He is a brilliant songwriter who has made a ton of amazing albums. He's charted over and over on the national folk radio charts. He's played sold-out shows all around New England, but he is also a fantastic writer, and his writing has nothing to do with his songs. Rob is a lover of all things about cars, and he is known in that world as the hack mechanic. He wrote articles for years for Haggerty and the BMW Car Club magazine, as well as many books that he has authored. One of the coolest things about my friend is that in all this art has never even been his main job. He is a physicist by trade, and I just love how art flows out of every part of his life. Now, before we go and talk to Rob, I first need to put my phone away. This has become my Mr. Rogers putting on his sweater moment of my show, and I want to make sure that you know that during this show, you have my full attention. Now that my phone is away, let's go talk to Rob about his incredible life and how art makes us all better. Let's go build a community. All right. Well, Rob, welcome to my show. I am so thrilled that you are here today. Thank you for coming, my friend.
Hey, Dan. Wonderful to be here.
All right. So I first met Rob many, many years ago. We were just talking about it in the open mic scene, probably 2001, 2002, circa either Club Passim in Cambridge or the Great Natick Center for the Open Mic with Owen Kennedy. As a songwriter, and at that time you were being played, or at least soon after that, on WMB, and were this really kind of like, when I was this youngster, like Rob Siegel, he's a big deal, and you were just always so ridiculously kind to me as this young songwriter back then. So I've just always just really valued that and your friendship over the years and all the times
Thank you.
Come to open mic. So I'm thrilled that you're here today. Rob, tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, where you came from. Let's start with the songwriting stuff. And what eventually got you into songwriting?
Well, to start at the very beginning, I'm a nice Jewish boy from Old Bethpage, Long Island. I moved up to Amherst, Massachusetts in 1969. So as a kid who was raised on AM radio and Cousin Brucey, living in Amherst when I was in junior high school kind of kicked open the doors to everyone, from James Taylor to obscure bands from the Pioneer Valley, to Gordon Bach, and just exposed me to the whole world of folk music that was a distinct thing from the commercial AM radio world. Not that there's anything wrong with that world. I love that world. But I started to play the guitar, as early as like 6th grade. And I began playing it like all the time in like 8th grade. Yep. And Neil Young lived rent-free in my head, for decades.
I started in 8th grade too. That was the year that I saw some really played the guitar every day.
Every day. Hours every day. Mm-hmm. And then I hung a detour into rock and roll in my early 20s and stayed there for about 15 years.
All right, so what kind of rock and roll? This is great. I love rock and roll too, all sorts. What were the influences?
Everything from R&B to new wave. My wife is a drummer, so we were in and out of bands together.
Oh, that's so fun.
We still occasionally jam in the basement, which is a lot of fun. I think of those rock and roll years. As a band, we were kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. We would play original music in clubs, and then in bars, we would be a bar band. And the two didn't really have a lot to do with each other. Yeah. The original music, we played most of the rooms in Boston, the Rat, the Channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can't think of anything that was more work and less payback
than being in a rock band in Boston in the late 70s, 80s.
Than doing that. But still, in terms of the visceral impact and joy of trying to do your own original material out in the world with a band, nothing came close and nothing ever will come close.
Well, so like even so, our last show, I had Carter Allen, who's a famous disc jockey, and he was wearing a Channel T-shirt, and we were talking about the Rat, and he was talking about his time growing up in that scene and just how important that was for him as just a young person, being around people, getting to know people in the community, because the whole new wave or punk rock, that whole scene was very community focused, right? You know, it was also a community that could make enemies, right? So they were the enemies of the this or that or disco or something like that. But that had to be really pivotal for you in terms of just your own like identity, right? Like you're in this rock band. Were you the singer, like lead guitar player?
I was the vocalist, the writer, and mainly the rhythm guitar player.
That's so cool. So cool. So what was the pivot? So you're from New York City, right?
Long Island.
And you moved to Amherst. And I know part of the story. So Rob's got a brand new album this past year. I'm From Here, and it really is a beautiful album because it tells a lot of your story because there was a major hardship that came up, right? So the move to Amherst wasn't like this like move to Amherst of like, yay, we're moving to Amherst. It came out of real tragedy.
Yeah, my father had passed away in 1968, and in 1969, my mother moved us up to Amherst. She was originally from Boston. My father was a Brooklyn boy, and so Amherst was sort of neutral territory. It was close enough to Boston to be near her family,
and close enough to
head back and forth to Brooklyn to visit the grandparents.
So you're just you're a young kid at this point in time in Amherst, which is a big college town, right? And is that part of the whole reason why the whole folk scene is just so vibrant? I mean, Western Massachusetts is famously vibrant for the folk music and history of American folk music. But was that part of the influence, at least at that time, for the guitar playing and everything?
Well, it was just so not Long Island. I mean, I have another song about this from my first album. There's a song called Mr. Middle Class Suburban, where I talk about growing up on Long Island and how lily white it was and how insular it was. And when we moved up to Amherst, I very quickly felt that those Long Island years were rapidly receding in the rearview mirror, and I was very happy for that. Amherst, was woods and mountains and live music and college students and hippies and anti-war protests, and that was all very exciting. And in contrast, Long Island felt just so insular. In retrospect, I mean, I can understand why my parents wanted to raise a family there. It was a very safe, stable location. It wasn't until many decades later that I learned about redlining, right? The whole, it wasn't accidental that it was lily white. It was lily white because that was enforced by the government and by housing authorities and by banks and by lenders. So, looking back at that now, the sense of ambivalence that I have about it is even stronger than it was when we left. And yet, now I live in Newton. I've lived in Newton for almost 35 years, which is a bit more diverse and integrated than Old Bethpage was. And but that's where my kids are now from.
That's what you said in the song, right?
Yeah.
So the song "I'm From Here," it's a beautiful song because it really kind of opens up and tells the story about losing your dad, and then living in Amherst and the weird because of that move, like you seem to have gone through a time like, where am I from, right? That question, like, what is the story? But at the end, you come on this point, like, I'm from my mom and I'm from my dad,
right? So that
you're from Bernice and
Kenneth, right? So whenever I play either of those two songs, either I'm From Here or Mr. Middle Class Suburban, I usually introduce them by saying that singer-songwriter Songwriter 101 is write a song about where you're from, right? It's what you have to do. Most Americana songwriters, are either from hard Scrabble upbringings or like to portray that they're from old Scrabble, that they're from hard Scrabble upbringings. And I joke, I'm from Long Island. What am I supposed to do with that? You can't spin that as,
that's the same
as
with
hardship.
Me. Like we're at the HCAM right now, right? The Hopkinton Cable Show.
Right.
I'm from Hopkinton.
Right.
I grew up here.
Right.
And this is also a really nice town. There's times that it was voted like the safest town in America.
And there's nothing wrong with it. When I was in college, I took a poetry class and we read William Carlos Williams and we read Patterson. And a lot of the theme of Patterson is that the classic, the heroic, exists wherever you are and wherever you're from. And if it doesn't exist in Patterson, New Jersey, then it doesn't exist anywhere, right? That's what William Carlos Williams was trying to say. And so that actually had a big influence on me as a songwriter. And it was what made me think, well, it's okay to write about being from Long Island. But in particular, the song I'm From Here was me struggling with the fact that there's a difference between where you're born, where you call home, and where you feel like you're from. Those can be three distinct things and places. And in my case, it turned out not to be a place at all. It was the epiphany that I'm actually from my parents. And, if it's a piece of dirt, right, it can be that small cemetery plot. That was actually a literal epiphany that I had.
Because in the song you talk about like 50 years, right? So like 50 years later, your mom joins your dad.
Yeah.
Like 50 years.
Yeah.
What an amazing amount of time to be separated from your spouse, right?
Yeah.
But it's just such a powerful image. So now you're in Amherst. You're in the new wave band, that's great. What were some of your favorite like fellow bands at the time? Like the things that people might know. Like any like music that you just loved, or like were you into like we're talking like the era of the Cars or like REM?
I loved REM. I adored REM. Very unlike anything that I write. That's like entirely right brain stuff.
Yeah, that is Michael Stipe's songwriting and lyrics are very right brain.
His indecipherable elocution is a thing of wonder.
It is a thing of wonder.
It's also I've thought about this a lot over the years. I mean, singer-songwriter music tends to be very lyric centric, and that's what drew me to it. Not everything has to be about the story. I tend to like songs that that are about something. REM songs aren't necessarily about anything, and much of the time, I say, if I were to teach songwriting, I would say, rule number one, a song needs to be about something. It doesn't have to be a story song. It doesn't have to be linear, but it still should be about something. It should have a core. It should start with you deciding what you want to say and then figure out how to say it. And, REM songs aren't like that at all. Wilco songs aren't like that at all, right? Those are a lot more about mood and texture, and that's okay. It's
Radiohead's at times similar to that too, right?
Sure.
Yep. I just saw Wilco last week. They were great. I'm a big Wilco fan. But yeah, I'm sure I don't really write like that either. I tend to write, even though I have some obtuse songs that might not be clear, they mean something to me. Even in the end, I'm not taking words from the New York Times and putting them together in this interesting way, right? Like, even if I write something obscure, it means something very directly to me, which is interesting. It's interesting when people write and they don't do that, because I think it's really interesting. I think it's interesting.
Well, I mean, there's no right or wrong way
to
do this. I tend to approach songwriting like you would approach adding an addition onto a house, right? You don't just start to rip down walls and to tack up sheetrock, right? You have a plan. At least I hope you would before you start to rip down a house. And so I have ideas for songs, and I accumulate them on the laptop. And it may take me a while to get to them. And then once I start, it's usually a weeks long process, sometimes longer. And every once in a while, something will happen that barges its way to the head of the line. I'll have an idea. I'll hear something, I'll see something, and I'll go, oh, and I'll pick up the guitar. But that's rare. Because it's rare, the songs of mine that are like that are kind of precious to me, because that's very much the exception. And those tend to be the songs that I think of as non-linear songs, right? The linear songs are songs like I'm From Here, where very clearly I set about, to write a song about the whole concept of the distinction of where you're from and where you call home, right? There's a big distinction between that and at the whole, other end of the spectrum, right? Something like Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again, right? Which I think of as the poster child for like non-linearity. Then again, you could think of Hard Rain as a non-linear song, and
it is, but
it's not.
It comes back linear, right? So it's like non-linear, linear.
Right.
Dylan does that a lot. He'll go like non-linear, and then a line or two will be very linear, and then back off. It's really interesting.
And just because you might interpret a song as non-linear doesn't mean that it just flowed out, in one scribble by the writer. I mean, often there's a lot of craft behind something that may appear to have very little structure. Yeah. Right. So,
or a lot of practice. Like Jeff Tweedy writes a song a day, like, of Wilco, the lead singer of Wilco and songwriter. He writes like every day. And if you write every day, I think it's just part of like making your muscles strong and being able to see that. And I don't write every day. So let's get into this. So you're in the band, and then by the late 90s, you're doing pretty seriously the folk thing. So what was that transition?
Yeah, well, so our first child was born in 88, and we took some time off, and then we continued to play. And then the second child was born in 1990. And at that point, we hung it up in terms of original rock and roll, right? That was it. That was the dividing
So
line.
the wife always, because I've met your wife before a couple of times at different shows.
Mary Ann, yeah.
So, but she was your drummer? I just love that.
And she still is.
That's amazing.
We still have the equipment in the basement. She's still smacking those old Ludwigs.
Just like White Stripes, Rob and Mary Ann.
Absolutely. But we continued to play rock and roll. We continued as a cover band for years and years and years. It became less about bars and more. We started to play fundraisers for the PTA for our kids' elementary school in Newton. Yeah. Right, the public elementary schools in Newton. And that had a surprisingly long life. We played annual Halloween events. We played annual spring events that were outside, which was great because, the number of times before that I had been able to play rock and roll outside and not have the cops show up, totally. Was like slender. And so all of a sudden, to be able to play outside in the sun at like sanctioned events was great.
It's great.
And, that kind of wound down as the kids aged out of the Newton school system. And I don't think we've played a live show anywhere other than in the basement since about 2014. But we still jam in the basement regularly with old bandmates. And boy, there's not many things that are more fun than that.
No, playing live music with friends, specifically people you've been playing with for a long time, is just so fun.
But the
crowd or not, purpose or not. It's
Absolutely.
just great. Yeah.
But the return to folk music, the return to singer-songwriter music, kind of gradually through the early to mid 90s, I found myself drawn to it. And actually, the album that I heard that made me think, oh, so this is folk music now, I like this, was John Gorka, Land of the Bottom Line.
Ooh, that's a great album and a great song.
Yeah, I heard Armed with a Broken Heart on the radio, and I thought, who is this? And I found out, and I went out and...
It makes so much sense that you like John Gorka. That's he's like a linchpin for you to be doing this, because that makes a lot of sense. You're very similar in some ways.
So I think I gravitated to the Passim open mic in 1995, thinking that this was a long-standing institution, and I learned years later that it really wasn't, right? 1995 was sort of just after one of the reboots and reinventions of Passim, and the open mic had been dormant for many years, and so that was when it was restarted. I think that Jeff Cannon was the open mic host at that time, and so the sweet spot of those years, as you probably remember, was like 95 to like 2003-ish.
Yeah, but I was really only there 2001, 2002, 2003. But at this open mic, like there was I think one time that I went, there was 80 people on the list, and I know there was times there was more. Which is, if you think about 80 times 5 minutes each and just put out the night, you can see the show was going to be.
In the mid to late 90s, the Passim open mic and the mic at the old Vienna Coffee House in Westboro,
which is just on the road from here.
Oh,
and I knew about that. I was a senior in high school, and I was getting into Els Paul after going. I went from Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Bob Dylan, early Wilco, to the singer-songwriter scene around here. And I was so excited that right next door, there was this thing that was I figured would be here forever. I went to college next year, gone.
Yeah, that was sad.
But but that's the thing. It's the ability for folk music in venues is very fleeting, because there's just not a lot of capital or money to be made in it. It's such a passion for people to do.
It is. And that's one of the big things that drew me back in. I mean, folk music still has the same issues of butts and seats, right? If you have a gig, you have to pull in people, but the degree to which it's far less about the money than the rock and roll world, and far less artifice and far less attitude, was enormously appealing.
So because your whole life you've been, I mentioned in the intro that you've worked as a physicist, but you said that you were more, explain what your day job's been, because
we lived in Austin for a couple of years in the early 1980s, and when we moved back here in 1984, and I was looking for a job. There weren't a lot of jobs for people with a bachelor's in math and physics, but I was also a software engineer, and for that there were a lot more jobs. So I answered an ad in the Boston Globe, back when you would look for jobs in the newspaper, and I found this odd-sounding job that had to do with finding unexploded bombs on old military training ranges under the umbrella of environmental cleanup. And so that was the job that I got in 1984, and that I had for almost 35 years. And so what this was applied geophysics, integrating metal detectors and GPS on moving platforms. Most of this was on land, some of it was in the water, to look for unexploded shells. And it sounds, whenever you say that, folks think that they're landmines. Folks think that if you're driving over land, if you find something, the vehicle that you're driving in will immediately get get blown up by the thing that you're trying to detect. And there's a distinction between landmines that are designed to kill you and unexploded shells that are only there in the ground
after trainings and after,
because they're duds, right? Because they didn't explode when they had smacked in.
But one of the things I always loved about this side of you is that, and really, like, I just love the idea of that, like, somebody with such a math-based mind, right? You consider yourself that, right?
Yeah.
Being able to do all these things with writing and songwriting and art, because I tend to be more of a math-based person. That's my skill. Like, the thing that I was good at in high school was math. I had a horrible math education, I feel like, because I wasn't ever taught to love it. But there's something about because you usually think the artist is going to be the other side of the brain, right? Doing all this stuff. But you're the one who's come out here with, many albums. This is your two latest albums in the past. When did the Landscape come out? That was like 5 years ago?
2018.
28, okay. And then the other side that we haven't even talked about yet, because we're pretty deep into this. We probably should take a break and have you do some songs in a second. And we're going to get to this part after the break. But Rob's a fantastic author. He's written many books about his love of cars. You wrote for magazine for years and years as the hack mechanic. We're going to get into that afterwards. But just the idea that somebody who is so mathematically based can still be so involved in the art, I think is just such an important thing, because most people don't think of it that way. So what is your experience like? Just because it seems like it just flows out of you. Neither of these things, being the author or being a musician, was the thing that provided for your family the house and all that stuff, right? This was the stuff that just you had to do. Like, the art was there, right?
Yes, and the real world engineering job intersects with the musical stuff, intersects with the singer-songwriter stuff in the odd way that I returned to the folk world. I put out my first CD in 1999. I started to get some small amount of traction. I put out my second CD in 2004. And there was an event, I'll remember this until I die, when I was in Albuquerque on a geophysical survey on a Friday night, and the equipment is returning from the field, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on that, oh my God, I have a gig tonight at the open mic that Jimmy Dore runs. And I immediately called Jimmy and I said, I'm really sorry, I completely forgot about this. And whenever I see him, we still joke about this. Hey, remember the time that I had to call you from Albuquerque to cancel a gig? But it really wasn't very funny, and it was indicative of the fact that I was being pulled in too many directions.
Yeah.
And as my kids were getting older, and my oldest was now in high school, and I started to look at the cost of college, and I kind of realized that my engineering job was the goose that was laying the golden eggs.
Yeah.
I thought I kind of need to front burner this and to back burner the musical stuff. And I continued to play and I continued to write, but I stopped trying to actively book shows.
Right.
And I didn't expect that to last for 15 years, but that was sort of what happened.
Yeah, but I think that's a pretty healthy way for anyone to live a life. Because I've gone through a little season of that myself. At the moment I'm doing a lot with art and music again. But I'm not really trying to make it my living, because I have kids, right? And my kids are doing awesome. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I know that for the next probably 5 or 6 years, I can only do things at this certain level. That's why I'm so grateful for HCAM for helping me put on this, because it's a way for me to, I don't have time to, one of the things I used to do when I knew Rob is I ran my own open mic for about 15 years. And Rob came all the time, and I had you feature all the time and stuff like that.
And bless you for that. I'll start to get verklempt if I talk about this, but the open mic world is so central to people like us, and to honing our craft. It's a cliche, but it's not a cliche. And the sense of community and trying out new material. And so folks like you who did that for 15 years, seriously.
Well,
man,
it was,
bless you for doing
but it was the best musical thing that I ever did. It's just an issue of that, I don't have that time because that's a whole night away. Like the wonderful people at HCAM, like I come onto the show and we talk for an hour and I'm like, bye guys. And they edit it and they just do an amazing job. All right, enough of that. So we've had a wonderful talk. We're going to get back to the next part. After you do some songs, we're going to get into the writing and the cars and this side of it, because this is a huge part of your life and your artistic life. But let's take a little break right now, Rob. Play us a couple songs and maybe even read us a little bit of something.
Okay.
All right, let's do it.
As I said with Dan, I don't usually have sudden ideas for songs, but I was on Facebook and it reminded me that a decade ago I had written, I dreamed I said to Sisyphus, at least you've got a job. And I wondered why that was. And then I remembered, 10 years ago, I almost lost my job. And I thought, why don't I write a song where I say a series of outrageous things to historical, mythological, and political figures? So this is I Dreamed I Said to Sisyphus. It was early in the morning, still half in the arms of sleep. The Sandman was retreating, but the ruts he left were deep. The washing of my consciousness through melatonin swirls left this strange but half-remembered conversation with the world. I dreamed I said to Spartacus, it isn't you, it's me. I dreamed that I told Tantalus, don't covet what you see. I dreamed that I asked Jesus, where'd you get the angry mob? I dreamed I said to Sisyphus, at least you've got a job. I dreamed that I told Faulkner, you were right about the South. I dreamed I asked Abe Lincoln, what the hell do we do now? I dreamed that I asked SCOTUS, what's the going price for law? I dreamed I said to Sisyphus, is this the final straw? I dreamed that I asked Leonard Cohen, why wasn't it amen? I dreamed I asked Robert Johnson, would you make that deal again? I dreamed that I asked Jerry, where'd you put the box of rain? I dreamed I asked Steve Goodman, did you really ride that train? I dreamed that I told Tesla, well, you clearly got that wrong. I dreamed I said to Dylan, that'll never be a song. I dreamed that I told Woody, you're overrated, son. I dreamed I said to Morrissey, would you try to have some fun? I dreamed that I told Hillary, it was more than just bad luck. I dreamed that I told Kennedy, when you get to Dallas, duck. I dreamed that I told Hannibal, you can't get there from here. I dreamed I said to Sisyphus, is it boredom that you fear? I dreamed I said to Spartacus, it isn't you, it's me. I never wanted to be known as the singing mechanic or anything. Even though I'm a car guy and a singer-songwriter, I've tended to keep those two worlds as far apart as possible. But a friend of ours, there was a fellow named Rob Ayers who was a regular at the open mic that Dan used to host. And he was also a car guy. And so I wrote this about Rob. This is called We'd Talk About Cars. There's a guy I met at open mics I really like to hear. I'd see him every couple weeks over the span of several years. He's a damn fine musician, many folks would say. And while I'd agree completely, I knew him in a different way. We'd talk about cars, all the MGs and the Triumphs and the stupid things we don't. We talk about cars, the ones we learned to drive on and the ones that got T-boned when we weren't playing our guitars. We talk about cars. He'd drive to gigs in his Porsche. I'd drive my BMW. We joked how real musicians have to drive a Subaru. It's true. I have this dead old British car I'd bought 6 years ago. He'd ask, "What's the latest with the Lotus?" And I'd shake my head and say, "You know," and we'd talk about cars. The swagger of a Jaguar, the panache of an old Cord. We'd talk about cars. How to balance out your passions with what you can afford. The appeal of patina and old scars. We talk about cars. He once told me a story I'll remember until I die. He just sold his old sports car and took it out for one last drive. He wound it to 100 until the blue lights made him slow. He was cool, contrite, and truthful until the cop just let him go. But then he pushed his luck and asked, "Any more of you ahead?" The officer was indignant. He said, "I can't tell you that." He was about to drive away when the policeman took a stroll, walked back to my friend, winked and said, "It's clear on up to Lowell." I don't know anyone else who could have gotten away with that. I finally got the Lotus running on a beautiful spring day, and just then I heard the awful word that my friend had passed away. On that car's first drive, I thought, I cried, he would have loved to hear about this, and I'd never get to tell him. We'd talk about cars, the places that they took us, the adventures on the way. We'd talk about cars, and I'll miss that just as much as the music that he played. And if he's up there driving around the stars, I hope he finds someone to talk about cars. Most of what I write about cars is about cars. It's wrenches on bolts sort of stuff, or my experience with certain cars. But every once in a while, like with songs, there's a column that is different and is a little more emotional and a little more about the humanity of it. And so this is one of those. This is called Hank the Car Guy. When we moved out of my mother's house in Brighton, Mass, nearly 25 years ago to the Tony suburb of Newton, I'm joking about the Tony part. I live across the street from a landscaper and his chorus of leaf blowers. Our next-door neighbors, Hank and Jeanette, a retired childless couple, seemed like nice folks. Hank introduced himself with a smile, saying, "Some folks call me Hank the Crank." He didn't seem like much of a crank to me. But with an introduction like that, it shouldn't have surprised me when the other shoe dropped. It's difficult to say exactly what triggered the turnaround. It appeared to be some combination of educational resentment. He began calling me college boy. The number of cars passing through my hands and my working on them in the driveway, as my 1973 BMW 3.0 CSI occupied the precious but decrepit space inside my rusting, leaning, corrugated metal single-car garage. Perhaps Hank was concerned my activity was lowering his property value. Or perhaps I'd transgressed an unwritten law about parking opposite his house. His land yacht of a Lincoln Town Car did appear to need the extra clearance and turning space when he'd back it out of his driveway. Things got bad. He appeared to watch the registration and inspection stickers on my cars and would call the police on me if, during my first spring drive in the car, if either of the stickers had expired over the winter. When I prepared to replace the garage, the animosity erupted into all-out warfare, at least on his end. I wanted to build a nice, new, larger structure where the old one was, but since the old one was 1 foot from the property line, I had to apply for a variance. As a lifelong Newton resident who knew a lot of people, Hank seemed to be the invisible hand behind a rubber stamp denial. No one needs a garage, and no one needs one of the size you're proposing, solemnly intoned the head of the committee who rejected my application. Clearly not a car guy, I thought. The same could be said of Hank. What could someone with a Lincoln Town Car, the poster child for floaty suspension and same-day steering, know about my passions? As it happened, the variance denial was a gift. It forced Mary Ann and I to rethink the plans, and we wound up building a larger garage that didn't need variance approval. When my friend and contractor Alex showed up with the building permit and a backhoe and started to dig, Hank was apoplectic. When Alex accidentally knocked down a section of his fence, Hank came out of his house red-faced and screaming, threatening to call the police. Alex thought Hank was going to have a heart attack or burst an aneurysm or both. After that, I don't think Mary Ann or I spoke to either Hank or Jeanette for 10 years. But time softens us all. Hank and Jeanette are now elderly. About 10 years ago, I began using my snowblower to clear their sidewalk in the winter. The first time I did it, Hank opened up his front door and yelled, "Robbie!" I thought, what, he's going to chew me out for this? Then he said, "It's been hard for me to deal with the snow since I've been sick. Thank you so much." I kept doing it. The relationship thawed. At the end of each winter, they'd give me a card and a small gift. Last spring, they called me over and showed off the new Honda Accord they just bought. They seemed to want my approval. "Very nice," I said. "Honda builds a great product." Then I noticed their driveway was empty. "Did you trade in the Lincoln?" I asked. "No, it's in the garage," Hank said. They still had the same one-car corrugated metal structure that I had torn down. But we were thinking, maybe it's time that we built a 2-car garage to hold it and the Honda. Do you think your contractor friend might be interested in doing the work? What was his name? Alex? He seemed very nice. I almost choked on the irony. Late last fall, I noticed I hadn't seen Hank around in a few weeks. I asked Jeanette what was up. "Oh," she said, "you didn't know about the accident?" She then told me the following story. Hank had become quite frail with signs of advancing dementia. He wanted to go for a Sunday drive in the Lincoln, but Jeanette thought that wasn't the best idea. They compromised and had her brother drive, but as they were pulling out onto I-95, they were sideswiped by a tractor trailer. The car got spun completely around, then was hit on the other side. The car's occupants were banged up but okay. The Lincoln, however, was totaled. As Hank's cognitive skills continued to degrade, Jeanette explained, "He keeps asking about the Lincoln, not wanting to accept that it's gone, wanting to see it and drive it again." "He loved that car," Jeanette offered. "It had only 20,000 miles on it. People were constantly offering to buy it from him." As she was explaining, it all came into focus. He'd probably bought the Lincoln the year we'd bought the house. He always garaged it. He had vanity plates on it with his initials and his birth date. The guy I was at war with for all these years was, in his own way, a car guy. How could I possibly have missed this? I can only hope that, in dementia's meandering path, Hank finds a nice new garage, and in it, his beloved Lincoln, and enjoys one more Sunday drive on a perfect fall day.
All right, Rob, welcome back. Those songs were fantastic. Thank you for reading. It's so great that you're here. So let's get into that other side. You ended that reading a little bit from your writing. You love cars. Let's first, how did you start loving cars? What was that journey?
Well, for so many of us, we're just wired that way, as with other things. I mean, some kids wander into the woods and see an owl, and that sets them on a trajectory to be a nature lover their entire life. I saw a 63 split-windowed Corvette when I was in Long Island, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing
Like,
that
that's
I'd
like
ever...
an 8-year-old, like something really young?
Five.
Okay.
Five. I was like, oh my God. And so it was reassuring to learn, when I became a car guy as an adult, that I was right. that is a universally loved iconic automobile. When I bought my first car, which was a Triumph GT6, a 1970 Triumph GT6, which I bought in 1976. So it was a 6-year-old car. And it was at that point that I learned that everything that I'd ever heard about British cars was true. All the metal fatigue, all the rust, all of the electrical problems, it was all true.
Beautiful, though. I don't even know anything about cars, but I know I know that story about British cars, but I also know that they're awesome, right? Yeah. So the whole point.
So that first summer I had it, obviously it started to break. That's what they do. And, I brought it to college, and I didn't have a lot of money. And so as it broke, I had to learn how to fix it. And before I was into cars, I was into bicycles. And so it was just another mechanical system. So, when it started to leak antifreeze, it's like, okay, where is it coming from? So you look, you find out where it's coming from. Oh, it's coming from under this. This thing has a flange and a belt. Oh, this must be a water pump. Oh, it must need a water pump. Okay, so I'll hitchhike into town and I'll buy a water pump, and I need some tools to install it. Okay, this looks like it's a 10 millimeter wrench. I'll find one of these.
Well, then since this show is all about community, we talked about like your love of the open mic community and how music, even in your band, like bringing people together, but cars brings people together.
Oh, very much so.
So you're in Amherst. You're probably going to the same like auto mechanic or the car shop that's helping you out. You're getting to know the people. You're building this relationship with people, and they're helping you out. You help each other on the way. When you meet another car person, then you just immediately like you just are also on, right? You're just talking. You talk the same language.
Very much so. It's said that car people all have the same fluid in their veins, and it's not blood, right? But whatever it is, it's the same, and it doesn't matter if you're into vintage Corvettes or German cars or Italian cars. We're all very similar. And so the first book, Memoirs of a Hack Mechanic.
Yeah, so this is a really great book. So this is a great story too. So I don't know anything about cars. I actually was driving on the way over here, and I'm like, what? Because we have two Camrys. We have Camrys, right? My wife and I each have a Camry. Very
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing reliable car. But I had to pause for a second and be like, what kind of car do I have? That was because I'm kind of going to talk to Rob. I have to make sure that I'm not like having a Accord. I'm like, oh, no, I have two Camrys. So I don't really know anything about cars, but I just am so interested in people who are passionate about something, because I think that's the human experience, right? If somebody's passionate about something, then it's a beautiful thing, because we're made to be passionate about important things to us to make us unique, right? But I was in Costa Rica when my son was 1, because I remember this, and I came back to my house, and you had driven your car all the way from Newton to Upton, and you had just left this on my front door.
Oh, I remember that.
Yep, you left this on my front door. And it wasn't when I was in Costa Rica, because I brought this to Costa Rica. Now my brain's thinking. And I read this whole book, a book about cars, which I don't care a lick about cars, but this was one of my favorite books. Because I knew who you were, and that makes it a little bit more special. But if you're a car person, I just highly recommend this book, because as somebody who's not a car person, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, because you're funny and you're witty, and it's a beautiful human story about this.
Thank you so much.
This is your latest book?
Yeah.
Latest book. This tell me about this book right here.
So I wrote the column, The Hack Mechanic, for a magazine for the BMW Car Club of America for 40 years. I just recently stopped writing it. So that is a compilation of my favorite columns from.
And that's what you read something from this just a couple minutes ago during the break.
Yeah.
Excellent. So okay, you have such an interesting life. Songwriting. new wave band, right? Like a serious mathematical engineering kind of job. And then doing the mechanic thing, just loving cars, kind of like as a pastime, right? You know, like I'm a cyclist too. I don't care about the mechanics of a bike, but I love cycling, right? But I view it as like I've never liked the word hobby, but it's a pastime. When music is like a passion. Cars probably was probably just like a hobby or something like that. But then all of a sudden you start writing about it. Like, what was the process? Like, when did you start writing about cars? Was that always like from the 1970s on, or all of a sudden there's a point that you wrote an article someplace? I just don't know the story.
I've always enjoyed writing. Even though I majored in math and physics, I took as much English as I could. Mm-hmm. And I always enjoyed writing. And I wrote a couple of articles for the UMass Collegian while I was at UMass. And I started writing for the BMW Car Club magazine in 1986. After I had owned maybe 20 BMWs. Okay. It turned out at that point they were headquartered in Cambridge. I became friends with the editor of the magazine. One thing led to another, and all of a sudden I was writing for them every month. And that continued, like I said.
So very recently, right? Because I remember just recently on social media, you were saying that your last article, right?
I just stopped writing for that magazine. I still write 2 online articles every week and a piece for a different magazine every other month. I left my engineering job about 9 years ago. Let me rewind the tape a little bit. That first book came out in 2013, and the publisher who published it then offered me a job writing more books. And at that point, I left my engineering job. And unfortunately, that only lasted a year and a half because it's tough times in the publishing world. Yep. So all of a sudden, I was unemployed. So I had the choice of trying to find another engineering job or trying to make a go of it as a freelance automotive writer. And at that point, I had traveled enough for my unexploded ordnance detection work. For a number of reasons, I needed to be home with my family. And so I decided to make a go of it as a freelance automotive writer. And enough things fell into place. It's a small fraction of what I used to make as an engineer, but it worked out well enough that the lights are still on and the creditors haven't tried to smash down my door.
So where can people find the stuff that you're writing now?
Well, I write for Hagerty, who is the largest insurer of classic automobiles. Mm-hmm. So I write for them every week. So you can find me at Hagerty.com. Or if you just want to Google Rob Siegel Hagerty. I still write for the BMW Car Club. So if you just search for Rob Siegel BMW, you can find all those pieces.
So, and then your own website, robsiegel.com.
You can find the links there as well, yeah.
All right, excellent. All right, Rob, so just an amazing life of songwriting and writing. And so let's get to the last couple questions of the episode. Where do you see right now throughout New England? Because this part of the reason why I do this show is just to talk about how art is building community, and we met in a place that built community. Where do you see it now? Do you see, and it could be in the writing world, it could be in the open mic folk world, or it could just be something radically different. You know of a theater group that's just doing an amazing thing right now. Like where are you seeing art kind of doing its job? Like art bringing people together, and making the world a better place. Do you see anything going on?
Well, let me answer that in a way that addresses what I think of as the taxonomy of a hobby, right? The taxonomy of a passion. My wife and I chat about this a lot. My wife, about 15 years ago, became a very avid quilter. Mm-hmm. So just like I will wander out into the garage and vanish for hours. She'll say, I'm heading upstairs to play with fabric. And just like I will head off to a Cars and Coffee event, on a Saturday morning, she will go to a quilting event. And so I thought about this, and I've written articles about it, that passions are often similar in the following ways, right? There's usually some sort of an object, right? In my wife's case, it's a quilt. In my case, it's a car. There's usually some sort of an activity. It can be working on cars. It can be quilting. And then there's usually some sort of a social circle. Mm-hmm. And if a passion hits on all three of those for you, you're drawn in, and it really becomes a passion. Mm-hmm. If it misfires on one of those, like if you love to cook and you love high quality food, but if the first time you attend a foodie event you think that they're all a pretentious bunch of jerks, then maybe you don't get drawn in the same way. Yeah. But if it hits on all of those, boy, are you ever sucked in. And then there's a fourth thing where if there's some adolescent thing, or if there's some childhood thing, right, like I described with me in the 63 Corvette when I was 5, yep. Boy, you really get drawn in. So to those of us in the musical world, mm-hmm. Who were very fundamentally affected by music when we were kids, yep. or especially when we were adolescents, that turns into a lifelong thing.
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
Where if it functions at any level, at the level where you're out there trying, to do it as a touring musician or attending open mics once a week, it doesn't matter, right? It's still this integral part of you that roots you and defines maybe not all of who you are, but a big part of who you are. And, that's wonderful.
Yeah, man, that's why, for me, it's music, right? And it's because when I was in junior high, I fell in love with music, but it was also my social circle, the people who were the alt rock kids. And then it was the first time being a songwriter and then going to the open mic scene and then feeling the people around that I'm not alone in this. There's this whole group of people who are on this journey with me. And that's just a really beautiful thing. I love that. And then the part of the show, I just like to encourage people, if you're out there, like if you're at home right now watching this or you're on your phone watching this, like put it down, get out there and if you like to quilt, go to a quilting group. If you like cars, go read Rob's articles and then go to a car show. One of my friends always brings his Chevelle to the car shows, and he just loves it. And it's such a beautiful community. All right, last question though, Rob. And this has nothing to do with community and stuff like this, but I asked this for all my music friends who come onto the show. This is this desert island. You're on the desert island. You have 5 full discographies of artists that you can bring to the desert island.
5?
5.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So what would that be? Full discographies.
Well, I'd say Nick Drake, but that's such a small...
three and I showed my son, speaking of Nick Drake, I showed my son Nick Drake while we were on a Hawaii vacation, and we just drove around for the whole trip listening to Pink Moon, the album, and he loves it so much. And it's just such a great bonding moment.
It's an astonishing album, especially considering the story behind it.
Yeah. Nick Drake's a good one. Nick Drake's one.
I'd have to go onto the rock and roll side and go with Guided by Voices.
Okay, great.
Because
great
it is a bottomless discography.
Well, they come out with new albums like many times a year, right? They have hundreds of albums. I don't know if that much, but that's a great choice.
I'm sure there's a lot of deep Neil Young that I still haven't listened to. Mm-hmm. My other knee-jerk reaction would, of course, be the Beatles. But boy, I know all of that other than
I like it. I like it how you're going. Like, I know this, so if I'm on the desert island, I can sing like Abbey Road in my head.
well, yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, to a certain extent, the artists that we love, or a lot of the artists that I love the best, either have short discographies or the material that we love the most from the sweet spot of from like what we think of the sweet spot of their career is really surprisingly short. Right? Simon and Garfunkel, it's like 3 records in terms of what we identify them for, right? Joni Mitchell, it's not as many as you would think, right? Before she went off into the jazz world. Even Bob Dylan, once I looked at it, the sweet spot of what we think of as Dylan, right? Those early years when the light was just shining through him,
and even
is only 6 records,
and even going to like Blood on the Tracks, which is like 75,
right?
Which isn't that far away from like the 66 album. Like,
so that would maybe be 9, right? If you stretch it out to there, it's maybe 9. I'd have to think about that question.
It's a good question.
I'm going to have to defer that answer.
It's a good question. I just like it because it just makes me think about just again, we talk about passion. The people that get mentioned at that question are just things that people are passionate about. Art that really moves you, right? Like Nick Drake. Nick Drake really moves me too. I love Nick Drake. Rob, you're the man. So everyone, thank you so much again, Rob, coming out. Fantastic books, robsiegel.com. And I just love your new album. It's such a beautiful album, reflection on mortality, about your family, about how, as a 10-year-old, you lost your father, with some really important kind of political commentary in the midst that I think is valuable too. So, my brother Rob.
Thank you so much, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Dan Cloutier community. I hope you were inspired by our conversation to make something new this week. Please put down your phone, get off your couch. The world will be a better place if we all make art together. Now, you can learn all about Rob, his songs, his books, and so much more at robsiegel.com. And to end today's show, I'm going to be sharing my own song called The Good Kind of Failure. It's a song all about the idea that we need hard times to truly grow. So I hope you enjoy. 1, 2, 3, 4. I wish there was a word for that good kind of failure. 'Cause we all fall down when we first learn how to walk. And holding my hand ain't always doing me a favor. I wish there was a word for that good kind of failure. And I wish it didn't hurt so much when you skin your knee. But it's all just part of being this human company. Some scars are bad, but others can be lifesavers. I wish there was a word for that good kind of failure. 'Cause each tough lesson learned, well, it can be your growth well earned. 'Cause even grief can grow your heart. And all of life's most precious things goes through seasons of suffering. And we all go through a little failure at the start. So now, when I'm down on the ground, I know you're gonna pick me up. You see, now falling over isn't always just bad luck. Without all these trials,
braver. I wish there was a word for that good kind of failure. All right. Thank you so much to the crew here at HCAM. Love you guys. Thank you for being here. They are the absolute best. And remember, make some art. Let's build a community, everyone. None of us have real control. You can't just snap and make it go away.